Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hingham Harbor and Downtown Sustainable Vision Study, our second stakeholder and community meeting following our first meeting, which occurred back in July, if you can recall that time. We're happy to have you with us. Thank you for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this evening. I'm going to first announce that we are having, this meeting is recorded. So we want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. The recording is basically being made available post-meeting. So we want to make sure that anyone who cannot attend with us this evening is able to take advantage of the information that's shared. So the recording will be made available on the Town of Hingham website. If you do not wish to be recorded, you can mute yourself and turn your video off. Otherwise, we're considering your participation as consent to be recorded. So I just had to get that disclaimer out there. And our agenda for this evening is really focused on defining a shared vision. And we're gonna present some information to frame that conversation with you all this evening. We'll give a brief welcome introduction to who it is that's speaking to you right now, and then also review information from that first meeting we had with you all, which was a very successful occasion back in July with a lot of information that we've received from a variety of stakeholders in Hingham Harbor and the downtown. And then we'll talk a little bit more in this meeting about study area existing conditions to frame that discussion around a vision. And then, as I mentioned, really the focus of this session and the goal is to get more information from everyone participating to define a shared vision for our study area. Then we will talk about some next steps as this process moves along. So just a little bit about the meeting itself. As I mentioned, it is being recorded. I gave you all that disclaimer. We have everyone set up right now, I think, so that you cannot unmute yourself, but when we get into some discussion areas, we will ask you to either use the raise your hand function, or you can raise your hand in your video if you have your video turned on, and we will recognize you and unmute you just to keep things orderly. And then I'll also try to keep your verbal comments succinct to allow as many people to contribute as possible. So we appreciate you taking those efforts with us this evening. So we'd like to welcome everyone on behalf of the Town of Hingham. We're working very closely with Mary Savage Dunham, your Director of Community Planning. I'm Josh Fiala, a Principal Planner at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. MAPC is the regional planning agency for the Town of Hingham and 100 communities around the greater Boston area. I'm joined by two excellent colleagues of mine, Darcy Schofield, a Senior Environmental Planner, and Yolando Spinola, Community Engagement Specialist, who are helping us sort of with the content, with the technology in many ways. And so you can see Yolando and Darcy there, and we'll get to hear from them a little bit later. So first off, before we get too far into the meeting, I see that we've got about 23 participants now. And we use this function, I think really you all contributed very successfully using this poll everywhere feature last meeting. And so we're going to try to build off that success in this meeting a little bit with a few of the exercises we have for you this evening. So to start us off, this is just an introductory question, but if you could on your computer, open an internet browser window. And if you can go to pollev.com/MAPCMTG, that will allow you to engage with interactive polling that then you can see the results on the screen as I go through the questions this evening. So all you have to do is open up a separate internet browser window of your choice. So Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, Chrome, whatever your favorite is, and go to pollev.com/MAPCMTG. And that should be able to connect you to this next slide I have. So we've introduced ourselves. So the first question is very simply, what is your connection to Hingham Harbor? So we can get a feel and a sense for who's out there. So just introduce yourself. If you want to include your name, you're welcome to, but we're looking mostly for what your connection is as a stakeholder to the Hingham Harbor or downtown area. And then if you want to leave your name, that's optional too. So hopefully everyone can connect to that. Yolanda has also put that link into the chat. So if you want to look at the Zoom chat, you can click directly to it. And hopefully that will be working for everyone. Let's see if some questions, some answers come up. So it looks like we might not be having a proper connection on this question yet. Yeah, so maybe as an alternative to this, since we're not seeing responses on the screen, if you do enter them through the internet browser, we'll be able to collect that information. So that's still useful for us. But if you would like to, you're welcome to enter the same information into the Zoom chat. That way people in the meeting can see it if they open up the Zoom chat window. So we appreciate you participating in that way. And hopefully we'll cross our fingers that the poll everywhere technology will come through for us on the later questions. I seem to recall actually that our first question in the last Hingham Harbor downtown meeting also failed to communicate in this way.
Josh, maybe if you go up one slide and come back, sometimes that will trigger it to start.
Okay, let me just give that a shot. No, interesting. Yeah, so I apologize about that. So it looks like you're all not getting the benefit of seeing the responses, but please do enter the information if you're able to connect into your internet browser, because we will get to see that on the back end through the technology of Poll Everywhere. So I guess I won't hang us up on the blank slide for too much longer, and I'll just keep moving along. So our overarching goals of this study are to create a shared vision for the study area. That's one of the items that we're looking to do, and that's really the focus of what we're after this evening. And then from that vision, we're responding to that vision in some concrete ways, defining short and long-term recommendations that are focused on public realm and open space improvements in both the downtown and Hingham Harbor areas, and then resilient sustainability improvements for both those areas as well, and then land use and zoning recommendations that would be complementary to both of those items. So that's really the focus of this work. It's a relatively compact study. So we're looking at, I think it's about maybe an 8-month or so time frame, and the study is funded at $28,000 through some town funds, and the majority of the funds are from MAPC technical assistance funding. So we appreciate everyone being a part of this. And so you can see the importance of this evening, because we want to define a shared vision that we can respond to with the other more technical items of this study. The study area that is the focus of our work is on the screen. And you can see that includes the Hingham Harbor area, the bathing beach, Route 3A as it cuts across the waterfront, and then the downtown area as it comes down North Street, and then sort of lands in Hingham Square with Central and Main Street and South Street. So that's the area that we're focused on here. And we'll be thinking about all of those overarching goals of the study for. To do so, we have been, with each meeting we had previously, and then we've been getting deeper into acquainting ourselves with the previous planning documents that are available, and you can see those listed on the screen. We did learn about some additional planning documents which we've been able to grab and refer to at the previous meeting, like the updated open space and recreation plan, the energy reduction plan, and then we've had the benefit now of being able to look at some of the in-progress documents that are coming out of the current Hingham master plan process. And our work plan is pretty straightforward, responding to the goals I just outlined, which is to define that district vision and then look at the public realm and improvement, public realm and open space improvements and resiliency, and then lastly, the land use and zoning. So that's the tasks, and the schedule of the project follows along with those tasks. You can see that here. So we're in our second meeting in October. We'll have a third meeting, which turns more towards the public realm improvement concepts in the beginning of December, and then have several more meetings in the new year, which allow us to revisit the public realm and improvement concepts and to get into some zoning and land use in the early spring. So that's what we're looking at, and then we'll be wrapping this up in the May or June timeframe of 2021. So I'd like to review for you now some of the excellent and insightful feedback we received from that first meeting and have been able to pile through and really think through the patterns that we're learning about. If you're curious and interested, there's a full summary of all the comments that were received in that meeting on the town's website under the community planning tab page, and there's a Hingham Harbor and downtown webpage that's underneath that hierarchy. And you can grab the recording of that previous meeting, and you can also look at the full notes that are uploaded there as well. So we had quite a few, it looks like, repeat participating stakeholders from that first meeting, and I see in the Zoom chat a lot of similar participants now, but we had business owners, Friends of Hingham Harbor, the Harbor Development Committee, Hingham Development and Industrial Commission, the Downtown Association, the Farmers Market, the Harbor Marina, Hingham Net Zero, just general interested Hingham residents, the Hingham Unity Committee, or Unity Council, excuse me, the Master Plan Committee, the Planning Board, Recreational Boaters, Recreation Commission, Route 3A Task Force, town staff, trustees of the Hingham Bathing Beach and the Ware River Estuary Park Committee. So a lot of stakeholders across the town that are interested in these areas. So we appreciate that involvement and you all being with us again this evening. So it's just a summary of some of those high priorities that were identified from the conversation last meeting. So one of the questions we asked was, what are the main draws for visitors to this study area? So the Hingham Harbor and downtown areas. Historic sites, the buildings, streetscape and cemetery, the Heritage Museum, the restaurants, and the retail was also mentioned, the waterfront and beach itself, the farmers market, and then recreational boating as a destination and other water activities like canoe and kayak rentals. So those were all on the top of people's minds as what they see as those main attractions for visitors today. And then we also asked what could potentially be added into that mix to attract more visitors in the future or different types of visitors. An inn or bed and breakfast was mentioned quite frequently. Better transportation access from outside the district. So whether that be shuttles, a water taxi, a bike trail, or other ways to connect to other parts of the town. Additional dining, which gets pulled more towards the waterfront and the harbor edge on the other side of Route 3A. Boating events or other consistent district events that would draw a crowd together on a consistent calendar or something that could be anticipated. A lot of talk about town traditions that could be repeated. And then enhancing the retail experience and cultivating a diverse mix of businesses and uses in both areas, in the Hingham Harbor and downtown areas. And then the notion of a Hingham Heritage Trail, which has its beginnings with some of the sign placards around the Hingham Harbor area, but could then be drawn down into the Hingham Square and downtown areas as well to really create a fantastic experience walking along a trail with all of the historic sites and activities that can be pointed out. We also discussed resilience for the district and what resilience would look like in Hingham Harbor. And there were ideas from car-free zones in downtown to encourage getting out of the car and driving less, better Wi-Fi and cell phone reception in the area, which could be an amenity for visitors and residents alike. Bike paths and bike lanes, again, to get people out of the cars and into other modes, less polluting ways to transportation. Attracting a variety of business owners that would add to the sustainability and resilience and financial feasibility. Thinking about straightforward approaches like drought-resistant plantings, looking at ways to address litter, avoiding use of pesticides, all of those types of approaches. Looking at a bike share potentially, how that might work or connect to other destinations around town, like the shipyard. And then looking at cooperation between all the stakeholders and actors here in the study area. So property owners, merchants, tenants, town hall, the DPW, other town offices and departments, and then other committees as well. Then things like solar canopies or the challenges of sea level rise, which have been show up in those previous studies, in which Darcy will get into the details of this evening. And then addressing the parking issues, perhaps through some different approaches to parking management in the district. And we also got very helpful insights from you all about what you want this study to accomplish. And I think that's helped us to refine our approach a little bit and is guiding our work. So finding a balance between the history and the need for making progress in a district such as the downtown and Hingham Harbor area, making better connections between those two distinct areas within the study area, generating attractive opportunities on the water itself, so on the harbor front, increasing awareness of Hingham as a town and the sort of the resources that the town has to share and the vulnerability of those resources and protecting them. And then bringing harbor stakeholders and downtown stakeholders together around shared goals. I think that's the focus of this evening. So I think we can really roll our sleeves up on that one tonight. And then looking at ways to define a vision with clear steps to completion. So hopefully that's what we will be accomplishing, starting, adding with more information this evening and then building upon that with the next few meetings. And then defining a roadmap, which I think we'll also really take on and hopefully can achieve through this work. So we do have some additional insights. There was a lot of information that we gained at the last meeting. Again, there's a lot more in that full memorandum that's available on the town website, but I also have some additional slides in a more strategic location later in this presentation where we'll share a few more of those insights in this presentation this evening. So we wanted to give you a little bit more details in terms of the study area to frame the visioning conversation this evening. So we have a few more study area facts. Darcy Schofield is going to walk us through a little bit more information around the climate risks, the vulnerability and the resilience characteristics of the district. And then we have just a sort of a teaser of information leading toward public realm characteristics and land use and zoning characteristics, which will be covered in more detail in the following meetings. So here's the study area again. And there are distinct areas within this study area. So subareas, of course, which you might think of as distinct and separate areas. But we're going to talk about why we think that the study area as a whole actually makes sense to look at together. So we have the harbor, which of course is on the water side of Route 3A, Hingham Square, which is that most historic core of the downtown area, and then the downtown area, which includes Hingham Square, but also the areas that lead up North Street to the Route 3A connection and sort of interface with that harbor waterfront area. So if you look at that study area within the broader context of the town, and what we've drawn here is just taken that study area and drawn a half-mile walking radius, which is the typical amount, the distance which someone would cover in about a 10-minute walk to cover that half mile. And that's usually used in planning circles as a shorthand for the distance people would walk to a transit location. So you can imagine if you had a commuter rail stop, that anyone within that half mile commuter rail shed would potentially be a rider and participant on foot, not necessarily driving there. So we consider, I also like to expand that from transportation options to think about other attractive districts and when you might consider walking to that district from where you are. A 1 mile distance would also be reasonable for someone to walk. It's not, you know, for most people who would be out walking, that's a distance that could be accomplished. But it's also a distance where if you have someone visiting from out of town, that's kind of pressing the limit in terms of what they would like to walk to get from one area of town to another. So you can see that the vehicular access for the district with Route 3A is quite good. Route 3A, as we all know, cuts through the district. And that was a highlight of some of the, one of the challenges that we talked about a lot last meeting. And if you look at the surrounding either commuter ferry or commuter rail stops, they're actually getting a little bit farther away. So it wouldn't necessarily be considered that our study area is transit oriented necessarily, but you could potentially attract a visitor if you had the right sort of promotion and program to walk from one of the stations that's just on that mile edge. But it's a little bit taller order than being within the half mile distance, as I was suggesting. And then if you look at some of the other attractions in the town, so the Hingham Shipyard area, which many people come down to from the ferry, or the Derby Street shops, which are along Route 3, of course, or World's End. I think there's a fair amount of out-of-towners who make that sort of visitation. Each of those assets in the town are also attracting visitors to the town, but are also a little bit outside even further of that 1 mile catchment, which highlights, I think, this map and kind of thinking about it this way, some of those connectivity issues which were raised in a lot of the comments we heard last meeting, and the difficulty of connecting visitors, particularly from one of these parts of town into the Hingham Harbor and downtown area. So here's a little more detail looking at the catchment of those 1 mile and half mile radii around the district. And this is just a little bit different way to visualize the district, which will come actually, this work that we've put into creating our own simple digital model of the district will be very useful thinking about public realm concepts and potentially some of the land use concepts as well. So we've created this district model with the three-dimensional buildings. And you can see here the detail of the district we're talking about. So really stretching down from Central Street, Elm Street, and Main Street, then along North and South Street, continuing along North Street towards Route 3A and the harbor. So then you can see along Route 3A, we're going all along the edge of the bathing beach and then up Summer Street to capture the wharves. So that's really the area we're looking at, and it's an interesting one. If you look at those, let me just go back real quick. So if you look at that half mile radius, the entirety of that district area fits within the half mile radius. So it's about a mile end to end. So maybe a 20-minute walk if you were to walk from end to end of this study area, which is a reasonable distance within a single study area to anticipate that people could circulate from one end to the other and enjoy all of the attractions and benefits of that area in a single visit on foot. And so again, there are those distinct sub-areas, but we think for a lot of reasons, concentrating these sub-areas together into one distinct geography that could be used to expand the offerings and the attraction of both or all three of those sub-areas, in fact, would be really a meaningful approach. But there are some differences between the sub-areas. So this is just a quick look at some of the parcel data. So the Hingham Harbor area, that area on the water side of Route 3A, there's quite a few less parcels compared to the Hingham Square or downtown areas. And those parcels are generally larger. So Most of those parcels are owner occupied. There's quite a few that are owned by the town of Hingham, others by the trustees of Bathing Beach. And so those are less populated with buildings. They are overall less valuable because they have less buildings. And most of the value that you're seeing compared to the other two sub areas is land value because there's so few buildings there. And then if you look at Hingham Square and downtown, those two areas are more comparable to each other. Of course, downtown is just the area that's subtracted out from Hingham Square, but you could consider downtown being the accumulation of both Hingham Square and downtown. So that would make those numbers additive, these two second columns. You can see if you divide it between the two though, the parcel count is comparable, the acreage is comparable, the owner occupation is comparable, so a little more than half or so, or just about half of those properties are owner occupied, judging by the mailing address of the owners in the assessor's data is how we're judging that. And then there is a number of vacant parcels in both, but most parcels do have buildings on them, and the total value of both of those is similar and much higher than the harbor, of course. The largest owner by acreage in Hingham Square is just due to the size of the St. Paul's property. So that's the Roman Catholic Archbishop there. And then on the downtown side of things, it's still the town of Hingham because the town has several smaller parcels which get to be larger than any of the other parcels in that area when added together. So we just return back to a few of the comments from the previous meeting. So what works in Hingham Harbor? So you can see on the left, all the items there ranked with the priorities that you all rated them last meeting. So new harbor walk is working, kayaks and rentals, benches, coffee shop, and et cetera down the list. And then the downtown on the right, unique variety of local shops, walkability, historic charm and resources, the Heritage Museum, the trees, all those. And then I think there's a fair amount of overlap and shared characteristics between the two. So you see desirable activities are working in both, and those are complementary potentially between downtown and Hingham Harbor. The walkability is working, the attractiveness of both districts, the active activities, the natural, cultural, and historic value and beauty of both sub-areas, and then the variety of attractions, which would be expanded if these two are combined in such a way that we're talking about. And then similarly, what doesn't work? So on the left in Hingham Harbor, a lot of comments about the unsafe aspects of pedestrian, walking, biking, getting across Route 3A, going anywhere except on that water's edge. Not connecting to other areas in the town. We saw that in the diagrams I just showed pretty clearly. No harbor dining or lack of parking on that water side of things. And then in the downtown, encouraging walking and biking is difficult because of some of the same things that were just mentioned on the Hingham Harbor side. Needing more variety in retail and dining, that there's some perspectives that the landlords, some of those I think probably what would be considered not owner-occupied properties by the assessor's data might not be contributing how people might like to see, and needing a place for a larger gathering or pedestrian-only area. And then there are a lot of overlapping ideas there too as well. So improving walking and bike safety, improving Route 3A safety and crossings, expanding the retail and dining options in both locations, both sub-areas, improving access to the area generally, and then coordinating for improved events and parking. So those are all a good to-do list for us to move on together. And then lastly, in turning towards a handoff to Darcy, we talked last meeting about the weather and coastal issues. So you all have seen flooding on the wharf and wharf inundation, heat island effect, and the value of the tree canopy to reduce that effect. You saw issues with the 2015 snowstorms and coastal storms, and you're seeing beach erosion and seawall failure as a result of some of that sea action. Then other resilience issues, rents being prohibitively high, worry about the financial feasibility of some of the businesses there, road safety on Route 3A is a recurring theme, of course. And then carbon reduction, if you could just get people more out of the car, walking and biking. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Darcy to walk us through a little more detail on some of those resilience concerns and getting our framing right for some visioning.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I wasn't able to attend your first meeting, but I'm really pleased to be here and to be on Team Harbor with Josh and Yolanda, a great team. As Josh mentioned, I'm a senior environmental planner, and I largely focus my work on helping communities understand their vulnerability to climate change. And I also direct a climate resiliency grant program and lead a resilience community of practice. And I do have a focus with an expertise on utilizing nature-based solutions for climate, though I do have, work in a wide range. So I'm really excited to be here at Hingham Harbor. I'm your neighbor in Plymouth, and I just recently visited and was so impressed at how beautiful it is. So it's very exciting. So when I work with communities, I wanted to, and on looking at vulnerability, kind of set the stage and understanding what our climate risks are. And I typically explain this and by looking at what has happened in the last century and then looking at what scientists have projected for the future. And then we break these down into 3 categories of sea level rise, temperature, and precipitation. So we'll just walk through these very briefly. The majority of this data is from the Northeast Climate Science Center from UMass Amherst, which is the science that the Commonwealth has commissioned and is utilized for the MVP, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, though I do mix in other data from other sources just to sort of further enhance the impact. So we're looking at, for sea level rise in the last century, we've seen 11 inches in Boston Harbor. So that's taken 100 years of sea level rise, and that doesn't include storms. That's just where the mean high water. And as we move forward, looking at sort of a range based on our emission scenarios, if we cuddle our emissions or if we continue business as usual, we're looking at increasing our sea level rise. So where the mean high water mark is 1.2 to 1.4 feet. And towards the end of the century, looking at 4 to 5 feet. And again, that's without storms. I do apologize for my dog. She's been very quiet, just waiting for me to speak. So in temperature, we've been looking over the last century. We've seen an increase in temperature over 2 degrees, both locally here in the Boston area and globally. And though 2 degrees may not feel very different on a day like today, we're still wearing the same jacket, 2 degrees on a global scale really has prominent impacts on shifts of our ecological systems. For example, more significant and severe droughts like we're seeing out west causing greater wildfires, or accelerated warming of the tundra in Alaska, or here seeing more frequent droughts during the summer months in Massachusetts, for example. It also is a little bit easier to take a look at that on how that heat is going to affect us on a more personal level. So if we're looking in the last century, we've had about 8 days over 90 degrees. That's kind of our standard, not in the last century, but say the last 50 years or so. And by 2030, we're looking at around 20 days over 90 degrees. And towards the end of 2070, 48 days over 90 degrees. So we're starting to look at a transition of our climate from New England hardy to a little bit more like Georgia and Louisiana as we move forward into the century. And then for precipitation, in the Boston area, we've had a 10% increase just in annual precipitation rates. And that has been over the last century. We're also, our standard is kind of 8 days of rain or precipitation events greater than 1 inch, which has been commonly considered an extreme weather event, though it is becoming more and more common. And though that, again, that increase may not seem, 10% doesn't seem so significant, what we are seeing is a 70% increase in the top 1% of precipitation in the top 1% of storm events. So our winter storm Rileys, our blizzards of 78, our major nor'easters, there's a 70% increase of precipitation during those events. So that we're cutting hammered down at these real distinct event periods, and that's for the entire Northeast. So looking towards the future, we can expect 9.5 days with events with greater than 1 inch of rain. And then towards the end of the century, we're moving towards 2100 and 2070. We're seeing the 1% annual chance storm, a storm that has 1% chance of occurring in any given year, become more frequent and becoming a 25% chance storm, or a storm event that has a 25% chance of occurring in any given year. You can change slides. So wanted to, again, we obviously want to look at existing conditions and build upon the excellent planning efforts that you have all done today. I have specifically focused on some of the climate planning work that you've done, starting in 2015 with ClimeFilter, with their climate change vulnerability, risk assessment and adaptation study. And just as a very brief recap, they utilized very sophisticated sea level rise and storm surge modeling that's been modeled by Woods Hole Group, commonly known as the Boston Harbor Flood Risk Model, to evaluate the effects of different storm scenarios and the depths of water during those storm scenarios on residences and infrastructure and coastal infrastructure, et cetera, in the town of Hingham. So it looked at all of Hingham. And I pulled out here, the column on the right are some of the recommendations that came from that study. So it's just about 5 years ago. And so I'm pretty excited to learn a few things have happened to make some progress on that area. So we are looking, there is a task force, I understand, looking at Route 3A. Hopefully we're looking at sea level rise on those renovations and the transformation of that area. I do understand there's some recent renovations and restoration to the Mill Street Pump Station. Bathing Beach and Dune Beach restoration was a recommendation, and I understand some of that has occurred. And so the Iron Horse Park coastal stabilization. And I do know there's been some seawall elevation. So I do want to really point out accolades on that for your town, that you've made real major progress in 5 years. We move on to some of the other planning studies. MAPC did a natural hazard mitigation plan. This looks at things like, though I don't believe this addresses climate change projection, it does look at how past storms have affected the community and your infrastructure and things of that nature. And so we're starting to see very similar types of recommendations that came out of the 2015 planning effort. And then most recently, Hingham participated in the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and now is designated. This is a little bit different in that it's more of a community-based planning effort. So we're starting to see more community values come into the recommendations. And again, Bathing Beach, resiliency of the coastal shoreline, protecting from flood are some of the key recommendations. We're starting to see themes throughout these. Next slide. So one thing I didn't really see was taking a look at the urban heat island effect and temperature on the study area. So this is a map looking at land surface temperature on a day that was over 90 degrees at Boston Logan Airport in 2016. And so the different colors represent, except for the green, which represents open space, the temperatures during this 90-degree day. So we're starting to see in the downtown, the heart of the downtown and the heart of Hingham Square, some really bright red areas. So these are areas that were greater than 99 degrees, which obviously would have a real feel discomfort for any passerby during that period. We can also see that there's a range at 85 to 91, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that is happening in this area. But heat is really important for just a couple of moments that I wanted to talk about the impacts of this urban heat island effect on the area. Obviously, it affects the experience of the tourists or walkability or bikeability. The urban heat island also has impacts on your air quality. So increasing exposure to, for residents who have cardiovascular respiratory distress or chronic medical conditions, in addition to heat stress and heat stroke, of course, for outdoor workers or those that are spending longer periods of time out in the heat. But I think one thing that really rises to the occasion, particularly in the times of a pandemic, is trying to understand how heat affects air quality in these areas. So we know that Route 3A is a major traffic corridor. There is quite a bit of traffic in this air. We have these emissions creating, sort of ground level pollutants. And what science has demonstrated that areas of intense urban heat create a photochemical reaction that increases the presence of certain air pollutants, specifically ground level ozone. So I think this is one of those important things that we want to think about when we're thinking about resiliency, not only for reducing our emissions, but also improving the air quality in this area. And also we'll talk a little bit more on the next slide, but yes, we can switch over. You can see this is a map looking at your tree canopy cover and your impervious surface areas. And this is from 2016 LIDAR data. So this is really high resolution data. So going back to the heat, we can think, there's a very direct correlation with the amount of impervious surface. These are areas that really absorb heat, hold on to it, and slowly release it during the nighttime, sort of keeping and retaining that heat in that area. And then we can see there's more green and tree canopy. These were those cooler areas in the previous map. But also importantly, this map is really starting for us to look at stormwater and how water may flow. So first, we know that this impervious surface, we know that there's going to be more water. We also know that it is really hot. I would just, sort of wrapping up that last slide, that hot stormwater is entering your water bodies and impairing those natural systems. And those are natural systems like for your salt marshes and your fish habitat that are helping to maintain a healthy marine system that enables you to recreate there in a safe way. So we want to try and avoid really hot water going into that stormwater system that empties out into your water bodies. So when we're looking at precipitation, again, you want to try and really elevate the importance of trees and looking at how impervious surface, though this area does not measure your stormwater. What we do know is that these extreme weather events that we've talked about, whether it's a 70% increase in during a major storm like Winter Storm Riley, or those 1 or 2 or 3 inch rain downpours we get during the summer, those have the potential to do a fair amount of harm to the whole area. So one, it can create overcapacity in the system. So I think that's one thing we want to investigate a little bit further into this study. 2, it's going to exacerbate some of the water quality challenges that exist in Hingham Harbor, which is subject to the Clean Water Act. So we're looking at incidences of E. coli and fecal coliform. We do know stormwater really affects the pollution levels specifically for those bacteria. So we want to start to think about stormwater, your infrastructure being over capacity during these weather events, that increasing in the future with scientific projections, and what are some of the things that we can do. So go to the next slide. I do want to, one of the things I love to do in my job is really quantify the ecological benefits of your trees and this ecosystem services that we can provide. We can actually measure their positive impact and the cost savings to your municipality with that. So the things that we're looking here in this chart, I'm comparing 2 areas so we can kind of get a sense of what it might look like with the tree canopy that you have existing in the harbor area, which also includes the downtown and the square, and a little bit greater. So we're looking at the whole census tract here. It's about 2,500 acres. And then comparing that to the Wampatuck, a block group in the Wampatuck area. So it's not the entire park, it's about 3,000 acres. And that's covered with 80% tree canopy, but they're really 2 just adjacent areas. So we're seeing in terms of capturing or sequestering carbon in Hingham Harbor, so these are the columns on the right, on the left, about 4,500 tons of carbon and other greenhouse gases a year. So that's saving you about $162,000 if you were to try to mitigate those in other means. If you compare that to the Wampatuck block, where we have 80% tree canopy, we see that exponentially increases the amount of carbon that we're capturing in greenhouse gases by 272 tons a year. Oh, this did not get switched, so excuse me. Those numbers need to be switched. I don't know how that happened, but I think Josh and I were working on from 2 different PowerPoint slides, so my apologies. It should be 7,452 tons per year with a cost savings of 272,000 in the Wampatuck area. But so we don't have to go through all of these numbers, but I do just want to kind of illustrate that the value of the trees that you do have in this area, and that there is potential to increase them. There's a fair amount of impervious surface, and we want to try and think about resilience in terms of these strategies that the urban heat islands also sort of exacerbate the emission scenarios where we're going to have increased cooling costs. So these are kind of the things that we'll be thinking about as we go through the resilience strategy. So this is why we're really exciting. I've never been in this position where I get to report good news, but there's some really great news here, and that is sea level rise has a very nominal effect on the infrastructure in Hingham Harbor. Again, my apologies of my dog. So this is looking at sea level rise in 2030, and this is modeled by a bathtub model. And pulling this, I utilized the Kleinfelder study. It is a bathtub model, which is a widely used model by NOAA and many others, which is just looking at the depth of sea level rise based on different based on the topography of the area. So we're so in 2030 we have very nominal impacts, but what we're looking at here are the yellow dots are municipal infrastructure, and green dots are non-municipal, but yet critical facilities that the town relies upon. And then the purple triangles are historic assets. So these are homes from businesses or structures or monuments that are listed with the Mass Historical Commission. So we did recognize that historic assets were an important component. They're absolutely stunning, definitely a beautiful aspect of the Hingham Harbor, so we certainly want to look to protect that. So as you would expect, the infrastructure that's at risk both at 2030 and at 2070, which you can move to the next slide, Josh, are pretty much the same. They're infrastructure that are in the water. So we're looking at Town Landing, Whitney Wharf, Bathing Beach, Inner Hingham Harbor seawall. We are seeing the Red Eye Roasters building is definitely becoming more at risk in 2070, and the heliport, the helicopter landing pad in Bathing Beach. So I think one of the things that's most significant here is thinking about the long-term maintenance and sustainability of Bathing Beach, which is probably the hardest hit area. We do have some flooding coming up over these hardened infrastructure, but certainly there's an opportunity to manage that for the near-term future. So I played around with the sea level rise to try and see, when does sea level rise really now this is just day to day, this is not including storms. When does sea level rise really start to overtop Hingham and become a problem? And it's really not until 2090 into 2100. So when I work with communities, we start to think about improving plans. We want to start to think about into the future and be visionary and be bold and plan for these future impacts. But we don't want to plan too far, for example, into 2090 or 2100, in the sense that we're going to have way more information in 10 and 15 years than we do now about the impacts of climate change on our infrastructure. But 2070 feels like a really good place for us to think about what kind of improvements in the duration and longevity of those infrastructure to plan for the sea level rise depth here. So next slide. So I think I'm gonna have you go to the next slide, Josh, and we'll go back to this one. So I think when we start to look at flooding and the real impacts of flooding, you've all commented that you've experienced flooding. I imagine Winter Storm Riley had some impacts. I looked online, I saw some great pictures of flooding that was happening, although great in the sense that it's pretty significant and severe. So we're looking here at the FEMA flood zones. And so this is really where we have our major problems, is when we have a storm. So we're looking at a 1% annual chance storm, a storm that could have a chance of happening 1% in any given year. And then we're looking at VE zones, and these are the areas in purple. So largely the VE zone is the open water in Hingham Harbor. So these are areas that would tend to flood at least one time in a 30-year mortgage. That's how sort of the floodplain insurance looks at it. So we are starting to see some real extensive flooding. And I think this is the areas where we want to start to focus about building resilience in the community. So not great news, but really good news in terms of sea level rise just as it stands today. And this type of flooding only becomes more severe for the annual chance storms as we look into the future. So if you could go back one slide. But I did want to sort of illustrate what's at risk here. So we're looking at the value of your historic assets, the value of your critical facilities. Again, these are sort of things that the town has identified largely through a natural hazard planning process and through the Kleinfelder process that are really support the town's function, from a helipad to a school, to a seawall, to a town wharf, hospitals, daycares, things of that nature. So as we look at our FEMA, our current zones, that's where we start to see the most significant problems. And we have 13 historic assets worth about, the building value worth about $4.5 million. You can add on, and then part of that is 6 of those historic assets with a building value of 317. So this is coming from parcel data, so it's not market data, just to clarify. But again, the value of these really is diminished as we look at just sea level rise in 2030 and 2070. We're looking at a total of 8 assets in both of those at risk to flooding, and with a very small value, and some of these overlap, so about $3 or $4 million. So relatively speaking, that's a very low risk, which is exciting. We have some really good work to do. And I think in terms of thinking about investments in this area, we can really spread them around to really improve and meet the goals that align with all of the values that you have identified earlier in this process. And we did add a little bit of extra design to help further enhance and protect those assets at risk. So I'm good, Josh. I'm handing that back to you.
Yes, thank you, Darcy, for that. That was an excellent background for future resilience considerations as we're thinking about the future visioning for the study area and these shared districts. I won't dwell on it too long, but just thinking about the public realm characteristics, and you can see some of those images on the screen, from the Hingham Harbor area on the top row to the downtown transition area just south of Route 3A, to the Hingham Square area. And there are some notable differences in terms of the character and quality of the public realm amenities as you move from sub-area to sub-area within our study area. And so that's just a little preview. We'll be getting into that in more detail in the next meeting. And then these are some of the public realm assets in terms of the streets that we'll be focused on, which fall within the study area. So that's just thinking about how the vision fits with the resilience and the public realm improvements. This is where all of that will come and meet in some conceptual design ideas on these street right-of-ways. And then lastly, just to think about the land use and zoning characteristics, give you a preview of that. You can see on the screen the zoning areas which fall within our study area. And so that includes the Business A district, the downtown Hingham overlay, which is basically all of those Business A district parcels in the downtown. There's the official and open space zone, the waterfront business zone, which is a few of the parcels along the waterfront, and then the Hingham Harbor overlay, which is most of that Hingham Harbor area on the water side of Route 3A. Then there are some Residence A parcels within our study area, and then several parcels which cut across multiple zones, either Residence A and Business A or some other combination. But the vast majority of our study area is within the Business A and downtown Hingham overlay. But we will be taking a look at these zoning characteristics to think about the zoning requirements relative to resilience and sustainability, but also to walkability, and if there are ways that the zoning could be tweaked to enhance those aspects of the district. So I know we actually talked a little bit longer than we were supposed to, and that's mostly my fault for starting us off with a little too verbose a beginning. But we did want to ask if you all had questions about this large amount of information that we just brought forward to you all to frame the vision discussion, which we'll get into in the very next slide. So I will pause here and hopefully see some questions arise, or you can feel free to put them into the Zoom chat or raise your hand if you'd like to ask or make a comment verbally. But you can connect to the Poll Everywhere through the pollev.com/MAPCMTG. Yes, we can provide a copy of this presentation. Looks like our Poll Everywhere is working this time, so that's promising. Hopefully you all can see that as well. No, you cannot see that. Darcy's shaking her head. I might be the only one who can see that, but I can see. I will repeat these responses for you all. But one of the questions was, can we get a copy of this presentation? The answer is yes. We'll make this presentation available on the website where the memo is that I mentioned earlier. And I will also get the first presentation up. I don't think we gave that to Mary yet. We'll get that over to the town. And then also, could Darcy give us 3 recommended action items based on her data? Yes, I think that the short answer is yes, probably not this evening, but I think through the course of this study, that would be what we're endeavoring to get to. Darcy, if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I guess I would just want to ask, I'll give you plenty. Don't worry, there's lots to do. So I'm really excited to do that. But I just was wondering if that individual could clarify if they're looking specifically around mitigation strategies or adaptation strategies. So ways to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions or ways of building more resilience. That would be the clarifying question.
So maybe, Yolando, since it looks like we're in a relatively safe meeting setting right now, if you want to allow people to unmute themselves, then that if the person would like to unmute themselves and clarify, we would welcome that.
Hi, sure, thanks. My name's Deirdre Anderson. I'm on the 3A task force and the Harbor Development Committee, and it was just really fabulous data and kind of overwhelming. So I was just curious, of course, the tough answer is both. What we all know what we need to do to mitigate, get out of our cars and reduce our carbon footprint. But I'm thinking because we are in a very active planning mode in our community right now, what are the 3 things you would do in the next 10 years or to, I'd say mitigate our impact?
Darcy, it looks like you're muted right now.
So Josh, I could go on all night about that, but I think you are all really headed on the right direction. I think and specifically in my experience in looking at this map, looking at the data, and then my experience of actually being on the ground, the Route 3A is a really key component of the revitalization of this area and sustainability of that, and along the harbor. So I think there's opportunities to really mitigate your emissions and create resilience at the same times, which is really what I try to advance, and we'll have lots of recommendations on that. I know 3A is a little bit out of the realm of this in terms of the state effort, but I think that we would still want to consider these traffic calming opportunities that really increase the natural areas around there to improve the walkability experience as well as the air quality of that area.
Super, thank you.
I'm going to take a risk real quick and stop my share and try to reshare it again for the next section of our presentation, because I think it would be very helpful for us to be able to see the poll everywhere, if I can get that to work. So if you just bear with me for 1 minute, and I'm going to try to reopen it in such a way that we can see that this time. Because the next questions are about the visioning. So it'd be great if you could see and vote on each other's comments.
Yolanda, were there any other questions while Josh is fielding this? Do we want to give another moment for questions?
Yeah, there's no other questions in the comment, but folks can feel free to unmute themselves and ask questions out loud too.
So Darcy, this is Phil Reardon, Chairman of the Harbor Development Committee. I agree with Deirdre, who is also on my committee and is also on the 3A task force, which is, two of the very, very big things that are really already moving, dramatically here. I'm intrigued at your interesting sense of the balance between, on the one hand, saying, in the relatively near term, sea level rise per se is not, dramatic. And that it's really the introduction of storms and velocity zones and AE zones that raise the risk, but on a probabilistic basis. So that's what our committee has struggled with over the last 3 to 4 years, working with Beals and Thomas to try to develop a smart response on the harbor wharves. How much do you raise them from a resiliency standpoint? I feel as if your message is reasonably consistent with where we appear, the direction we appear to be headed. But I wanted to, you've seen most of the materials that, led us, but not the kind of materials that we've used in terms of making a recommendation to the town for what target height we should aim for. And I should emphasize, we are, have been working hard on the question of, well, where do you set up your defense? Is it at the water's edge, for all of the wharves, in which case you could end up raising the wharves and you've got Fortress Hingham. Right. As opposed to perhaps this two-step process that says, look, you deal with base sea level rise on the harbor front wharves themselves, and you begin to think in those out years more about, do you have a secondary defense closer to 3A itself, some of which could be on a temporary basis. So, these are the things that we've been working our butts off for years.
Yeah. It is complicated, and I work in planning. I have an environmental background, and I'm not an engineer. And so I want to make that kind of distinction. But I think you've articulated what I was trying to convey very, very well. Thank you. Probably better than I did. Is that you can consider some of these storm preparedness interventions that are less expensive. And again, I'm not making any kind of recommendations that I wouldn't do that without my team. Like, we work together as a team, but I think that is one of the things I am trying to communicate, is that there are different types of solutions for you all that can be evaluated. That's not just raising up the walls. And in my experience, raising up the walls, to a point, there's pushback. And for good reason, as you say, you don't want to turn it into a fortress necessarily. The people come to enjoy that space. So that we do look at those, critical areas, those critical entry points. We also are looking at this different from an engineer. We're looking at the whole landscape. Like, how are these different components going to work together to really design something that achieves all of the goals as best we can? We can't solve all the problems, but we're going to work to solve them all. But I think that's right. I think there's ways of being very creative and strategic about this that's focused a bit more on the storm preparedness as opposed to the sea level rise. You do have to deal with it, but you have other places in Hingham where you do have major sea level rise problems. It's not here in Hingham Harbor. So I think that's good news for you, and it sort of helps kind of illustrate how you can make strategic investments.
Thank you, Darcy.
All right, well, I apologize, but it doesn't look like I will be able to get the pull everywhere to work potentially.
Josh, another option might be to pull up the Poll EV window without having it in PowerPoint.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, good thinking, Yolando. All right, so I will do that. It does look, when I'm you all don't need to know this, but when I share the Zoom features look a little different. So it might've gotten a Zoom update recently that has changed the way all this works a little bit. So I think without delay, since we are running a little longer than We want to still end at 8:30 as we promised. I'd like to shift into defining a shared vision. And if you have other comments or questions, you can type them into the chat, and we'll make sure that we get a way to respond to you all if you have additional thoughts for Darcy or others on our team. But let's jump right into defining a shared vision, since that's really our goal for this evening. On the screen now, you see a recent district vision statement that MAPC helped the town of Concord prepare for the Thorough Depot district in Concord. And you can, I just use it as an illustration of the type of statement that we would like to build from your feedback and comments this evening. So you can see that there's some description, like Thorough Depot is a charming village center, an asset for Concord's residents, an inviting gateway for visitors. And then it gets into its assets, so an economically vibrant neighborhood with a diversity of businesses, and then even a little bit of narrative about what can happen there, a place to enjoy a cup of coffee, choose among a variety of restaurants. And then as you look further down the statement, there's some ideas about what is actually envisioned for the district and how is that being achieved. So it's a neighborhood with new, thoughtfully designed buildings. They're well integrated into the fabric of the district, providing a diversity of housing options. The neighborhood's affordable. Then some comments in the second paragraph about public realm. The sidewalks are wide and comfortable, lined with shade trees and landscaping. Visitors can walk safely. And all of that paints a picture for the ambition of where the district is headed. And that's the type of thing which is very useful when we're trying to define recommendations to help get the town and these districts to that vision. So the basic components of the vision is sort of an initial statement or two about what the district is about. So what is Hingham Harbor and what is the downtown about? What is the study area about? And then what will be accomplished generally in the next intervening time periods. So is it 5 years, 10 years? We'll get into that too, the time period itself. And then what will be accomplished specifically? So is it, we've talked a lot about walkability, bikeability, public realm improvements, but what do we want to define? Make sure that we get some language around what are we achieving? What are those resilience goals? What are the land use goals? And then if we want to, at the end with an optional reinforcement of those top priorities. So that's, I think, a very useful structure of a district vision statement and a model for us as we go along. And let me see if I can actually just do this a little differently this time. All right. So I will now share for you. If you go to the poll EV, well, actually, I don't know if that will work, Yolanda. Because I think I need to have it open on in poll everywhere to make it activate with the window. Let's see if I can do it this way. Bear with us, folks. Sorry about this. It worked so wonderfully last time. We're trying to respond to this.
Too much to ask to have it work twice in a row. And Josh, the other thing I can do is we can just put up a Word doc and I can share my screen and I can write as people are talking.
Yeah, maybe I will cut my losses here and go back to the sharing and just show you all the question. You can still respond to the poll everywhere question in the window. So please have that browser window open. Let me just get back into here. Sorry about that. Okay, so the poll everywhere question, and so please do go to either pollev.com or you can type it into the, Zoom chat as well, and we'll just gather all these comments. I think I will probably actually be able to see them on my screen, but you won't be able to see them. So the first question is, does the model that I just shared of the Thoreau Depot District in Concord, does that model of a vision statement, do you think work well for Hingham Harbor and downtown for our study area? Or, because we want this to be useful for you all in the end as stakeholders of this study area. And if you don't think that this is working too well, we'd like to have a conversation about what you think would work better. So far on my screen, I'm seeing a 33% split, a third between absolutely it looks great, or it should work just fine, or I don't think so. I don't yet have any absolutely nots. Looks like now I don't think so has moved to 50% with 25% and 25% split between absolutely it looks great and it should work just fine. So if you think, please do take a couple more minutes to connect to that pollev.com/MAPCMTG, because it is working at least to get the information together. You just cannot see it, unfortunately. All right, so now I guess this will be the sort of final call, final tally. We have 20% at absolutely it looks great, 40% at it should work just fine, and 40% at I don't think so. So that might actually, we're at 60% think it's okay, 40% think it's okay, or not okay, or not so great. It warrants maybe pausing here and just seeing if anyone would like to elaborate on a different model, or what, if you have hesitation or concern about have voiced I don't think so, what would you suggest might be, help this be a little more relevant? Okay, so maybe we will.
There was a comment that there's not enough comparables with Concord to compare if it would work in Hingham. I'm seeing that in the chat. Seems good, but more details.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not, I wouldn't necessarily focus on the town of Concord as the comparison. It's more just about the structure of the vision statement is what I was asking about. Yeah, I apologize if Concord isn't quite the right fit in terms of how you think about yourselves in Hingham, but it's more just about how the structure of that vision statement was created. And of course, we're creating a vision statement together with your information. Looks like Deirdre has raised her hand. That's one of the few things I can see right now on my screen.
I think, and I wrote in the, I think we can set a vision for this area, but a third of this area is a pass-through for other municipalities. So do we have to acknowledge the obstacles of achieving our vision when for others it's a pass-through?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that given the amount of discussion we've had in the past meeting too about Route 3A and its difficulties, I would think it should be a part of the vision statement in a very practical way in trying to understand how that challenge can be mitigated to the best of the town's ability, but understand that it's not fully under your control, and there will be stakeholders of that travel corridor that do not see our study area in the same way.
Yes, thanks.
Any other thoughts before I move on?
There's a comment that it would work reasonably well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's just go for it. We're at 60-40%, so that's reasonable in terms of proceeding with it. So following in that structure then, I just have similar questions, poll everywhere questions that would help us with your feedback to populate those different parts of the vision statement rather than us just creating it all from the previous. I think we have a lot of great information from the previous discussion we had last meeting, but this is a more direct question about that vision statement structure. So first off, it's that first top part of the vision statement. So what is the district about? What are the most important aspects? I think we saw a lot of those characteristics in the information I shared earlier in the presentation. So the variety of restaurants, the variety of shops, the natural waterfront, the natural open space features, the historic charm. So I see on my screen one entry that it epitomizes two of the three main reasons people settle in Hingham: historic character and proximity to water. Like that's fantastic. That's really zeroes in on it. So those assets, I think we can define in a way, so someone has upvoted that now too. So you can up or down vote people's comments in the Poll Everywhere interface as well. So another comment is that the historic fabric of the community, where residents and visitors can gather to shop, socialize, visit, see the harbor, and worship. So it's a, you know, I think we can work with this and think about some language about it being the historic heart, perhaps the historic heart of the community. Another one is the ability of residents to socialize and congregate. Another, it should be a district that helps facilitate the interaction among residents and visitors. They're making it easier and more. I cannot see the end of that statement, sorry. You can also see these on your interface. The ability of residents to congregate and socialize, just got to upvote. A couple upvotes. So yeah, please do get your thoughts in here. And what we'll do is use the collection of these ideas and the feedback we had at the previous meeting to try to define in a draft vision statement what we, you know, a very reasonable way to define what the district is about and today and what we're building upon. What's that foundation? Excellent. So let me get in any new thoughts that you have. And then the next level down in the vision statement, what will be accomplished generally within this district vision? So we've defined some of that through your ambitions for this study specifically, and then we've also heard about a lot of the challenges that we need to overcome, specifically with walkability and bikeability, the challenges with Route 3A, the resilience challenges that Darcy highlighted so well in her data and analysis. But what are the general accomplishments that we're trying to drive toward with this vision? So developing a consistent look and feel for the entire area, preserving the nature of downtown as a social space for townspeople to comfortably gather, creating a more livable space for residents that is not car-centric, generating revenue, education via signage and walking. Sorry, these are moving a little too quickly for me. You can keep reviewing them on your screen too. Preserving the nature of downtown as a social space for townspeople to comfortably gather has gotten upvoted, as is creating a more livable space for residents that is not car-centric. There we are, education via signage and walking visitors of historic and natural resources and how precious they are. Great, so I think we will, this gives us a general sense of, now we have sort of inputs from you all for the foundations of the vision, inputs for what we're trying to accomplish and achieve through the vision statement. And now we'll move on to the next part. So thank you for getting all this information in so efficiently. Looks like there's a few more coming on this, so I will continue in 1 second. Welcoming and accessible to all. Great. And those, what I like about these statements too, is they have, the language is both ambitious, but also frames and clearly shows how we can connect to the details of some of the recommendations, which we want to get to in the next part of the vision statement. And the next question is, what will be accomplished specifically? So what you just previously answered would be getting us to the more general framing of the ambition and the vision for the Hingham Harbor and downtown area. And then what are we trying to accomplish specifically? So if we do want to make the district more welcoming and inclusive, as an example, how would we be doing that? Would we be doing that through accessible sidewalk improvements, as an example, or a safer and easier way to traverse Route 3A, or very specific and tangible ideas that would reinforce what you're thinking about for the vision to accomplish. So better walking and bikeability just showed up on my screen. Identifying public realm opportunities for trees, paths, connections within the district, protected bike lanes. So these are really the specific items which are consistent with the larger goals. More open spaces where community can gather and interact, car-free sections, resilient to climate change. The harbor should be more accessible and safer to bikers and walkers, for example, separated bike lanes or shared use paths. Diverse retail and food offerings. Making sure that the maintenance of the area is well managed. Greener, safer, inviting space. Accessibility to public transportation. Excellent. This is really helpful. And I think with this information and what we've gathered, it'll be a very useful amount of data for us to mine in terms of the vision statement.
Josh, just wanted to add some comments from the chat that history, walkability, fun activities near the harbor. And another comment that the changes accomplished by the work on 3A and the sidewalk expansion will be a part of the vision for the connection between the harbor and the downtown district.
Excellent. Thank you, Darcy.
I also got a statement from a Robert saying that we need a pedestrian tunnel under Route 3A.
Thank you, Londo, and thank you everyone for those comments. And so wherever you've entered a comment this evening, we will gather all of these different resources, the Zoom chat records, the Poll Everywhere records, and combine all of this. And then we'll be putting together a draft vision statement, which you all have a chance to review at our next meeting. And then lastly, if we did want to reinforce at the very end of our draft vision statement, a top priority, what would you highlight as that top priority to reinforce? So if, as the Thoreau Depot example had, we'll end up with a paragraph, a couple paragraphs, probably a PowerPoint slide full of narrative about what the district is, what it wants to be, what are the specific things to get us there. And then this would be the reinforcing point at the very end that says, but we're very focused on this one thing. So what would that one thing be? So make sure downtown and harbor is a place people are comfortable and safe walking around, pedestrian friendly environment to shop, dine, and recreate, street design in the harbor area that prioritizes complete streets. Many residents live downtown, so we cannot improve the district to the detriment of the quality of life and safety of existing residents. Diversity of shops and offerings, pedestrian friendly environment to shop, dine, and recreate. Linkage to the downtown area to our historic harbor area. Excellent. And a lot of those statements, there's a fair amount of overlap too, so we can figure out a way to help define that priority. But from what we've heard last meeting and this meeting, it does seem like the connectivity, the walkability and bikeability are major themes which are resonating with a lot of people. Tell the story of the entire area, protecting and preparing Hingham's defining features, maybe I would add there, just to guess. All right, so I will pause one more moment so people can get their thoughts in here. And again, up or down vote the priorities people have entered. And we have one last question as we nearing our 8:30 time, which we promised to you all. So it looks like make sure downtown harbor, the downtown/harbor is a place people are comfortable and safe walking around. That's gotten 5 upvotes from participants. So I'll go through these last ones a little quicker, just so you all know that I'm doing that. But we have one question, there's 4 questions left. There's one question for each of the specific topic and recommendation areas of our study. So what are we trying to solve in terms of district resilience? And then what are we trying to solve in terms of public realm improvements? And what are we trying to solve in terms of zoning and land use? And then the last question is about the time frame of the vision. But I think because we are a little bit off of our timing tonight, a lot of these specific problems I think we can glean from the excellent information you've provided us so far this evening. But if you do have the inclination to give us the specific problem statement for resilience, so sea level rise and storm-related flooding, safe pedestrian connections across 3A for access to the Station Street parking lot, maintaining livability of the waterfront while adapting to sea level rise, perhaps. I cannot see the rest of that statement. And stormwater flooding. Excellent. And I'm going to move right along. If you didn't get a chance to finish your thought, you can enter it in or copy it over to the chat. Thank you for putting those answers in. And next,
also mention lighting in the chat, Josh, just so you know.
Great, perfect. And then the next question is the problem we're trying to solve in terms of the district public realm improvements. And we have heard a lot of comments around this. So I think with the data we have now, we can definitely be triangulating on the problem that you would like us to solve or the set of problems. Take the utility poles out of sidewalks. Safer accessibility and mobility. And we've also heard in previous discussions about the consistency of the streetscape and the public realm. More small, intimate spaces to meet and gather outside, critically important these days. And we appreciate you all bearing with us just a few extra minutes tonight. Support vibrant retail, better pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure connecting harbor to the other side of 3A. All right, then the last question on these topics that I'm curious about is the problem we're trying to solve in terms of district land use and zoning, which we've actually, I think, talked a little bit less about so far within this process. So I'm curious to see if there are problems which you have identified or know about in terms of either land use in the district or any zoning issues which we should be looking at and be knowledgeable of as we move toward that part of the study. What uses would activate and diversify the appeal for all? Yeah, so finding the complementary mix of uses that would really elevate the study area as an attraction. Clarity around the question of marine use only for harborfront parcels. Should form-based code be considered for this district? That's a good question, yeah. I think we'll maybe have a better opinion on that once we dig roll up our sleeves a little bit more on the zoning review of the current zoning district characteristics. What use that's been upvoted now, the what uses would activate and diversify. Cannot see this entire statement, but it says ensure that the valid desire to maintain the beautiful historic, I won't try to guess what that last bit is, but focusing on there it is. Historic character of the buildings doesn't get in the way of keeping things updated and meeting changing needs, perhaps. Yeah, so it always is within historic downtown districts, a balance in terms of the land use and zoning regulations for both allowing change and evolution, but also retaining the fabric, the historic fabric that makes the district character what it is. So thank you for that. That will be very helpful as we look into this topic because we haven't talked about it much yet. So this is a good preview for what you're all concerned about. And this is the last of these questions which will help us get to the vision statement. And it is, what is the best time frame for the district vision? So as I'm sure you've all been aware with your master plan work, visions can be set to different time metrics. Master plans typically happen on the 10-year time frame. Sometimes district visions want to be on a similar time frame, but also sometimes want to look a little further out. I know in terms of the resilience planning, as Darcy was mentioning, time horizons out to 2050 or 2070 even are sometimes appropriate. But just to get a feel for the coupling a time horizon with the ambitions that we've just articulated with each of those statements you've given us. Looks like the majority of people are thinking 10 years is most appropriate, 83%. 17% think 5 years is appropriate. Looks like it's holding pretty steady at 10 years. 10 years is a pretty reasonable time frame for most planning efforts because it's both distant enough to make sort of bigger, meaningful change, but not so short that you won't, the time won't pass before the vision, the aspects of the vision are able to be accomplished. Okay, so we're at 86% for 10 years and 14% for 5 years. So that's good for us to keep in mind. Thank you for all of those. I apologize again that it didn't work quite as smoothly as it did last time. We should have known that the last meeting just worked out excellent. So we'll see. Third time, hopefully we'll be back into that form. Our next steps. So we will be doing, as I mentioned, a more in-depth analysis of the public realm conditions, the land use and zoning. We gave you this evening more of that in-depth analysis in terms of resilience and sustainability for the district. We'll begin defining some concepts that would respond to a draft vision statement And what also should be on this list actually is that we will actually draft the vision statement based upon everything you just gave us and share that with you at the next meeting. We have not yet defined the next meeting date. I'll be working with Mary at the town shortly to figure out what the best date is based upon the town calendar of events. It will likely be in the beginning of December for our next meeting. So we'll send that out to you all by email, get it posted on the town website. Hopefully you can all be available for that meeting as well. We appreciate your time this evening and your participation. And again, this is where we're headed. So we will be wrapping up the district vision statement in that next meeting with the draft statement, and then be shifting more into those second and third tasks with public realm and land use considerations and concepts, and then be working on those through the early spring. So again, we've gone through a lot of things this evening. We are a little bit over, but not horribly over in terms of our timing. But we did want to offer people the opportunity to either verbally through the poll everywhere or through the chat. If you had any closing questions or comments, we'll stop talking and allow you to ask those.
There is one question in the chat right now, Josh. What's the budget and what needs to be spent determines time frame?
For the study, I would assume. Is that? So the study budget is $28,000 total, which is a little less than we were hoping for, I think, from the various funding sources. That included a town match, town contribution of $3,000, if my memory is serving me correctly, and then a MAPC technical assistance grant of $25,000. So those are the funds we're working toward, and we're basically, I think tracking well in terms of our progress, in terms of the budget and our anticipated work plan. So yeah, that will carry us through the work plan, which goes until, say, May or so of 2021. There's a comment which just showed up that I can see on the poll everywhere that says, ensure this study is well coordinated with the master plan committee's work. In some ways, this work is a subset of the master plan work. And we agree with that. So I've been reviewing the draft working documents which have been produced by the master plan. From what I can see from those documents, it does appear that where this study is headed is well within the framework and outlines that have been described for the Hingham Harbor and downtown area, and in some ways responding directly to those comments. So for example, connecting this district to broader areas in the town is identified by the master plan, and that's something we've talked quite a bit about here. So we'll be thinking of some concepts to add detail to that through this study, and I think it will be consistent with where the master plan is headed. But certainly all of you who are involved potentially in the master plan or have on the ground knowledge with that process, if you see something along the way with our study that needs to be shaped up in terms of that coordination, where we would be welcome that comment as well. And then there's I can't actually see all of that statement. If someone maybe could upvote it, I could see it easier. But there's a statement that says there is a new proposal to eliminate commuter boat and reduce rail, which could affect connections, I would guess, in the town. So yeah, I think that the MBTA cost-cutting measures, which are being considered a wide range of, in some cases, probably pretty detrimental cost-cutting approaches, I think would have to be considered as those start to get firmed up by the MBTA, but they could potentially be painful for any number of communities, including our study area or connections to Hingham. I don't have much knowledge about what exactly is being considered, but as more information about that comes out, if it's within the time frame of our study, I think we could potentially have an opinion about that through our work here. I did also see a comment about the Accelerating Climate Resilience Grant. That was a grant which was applied for through the town back to MAPC, who's operating that grant. And those grant decisions have not been made yet, but that potentially would be an additional source of funding that would allow our study some additional effort. But that, as I mentioned, we don't know one way or the other on that yet. Yolanda or Darcy, do you either see any more comments in the Zoom chat or anywhere else?
No, I'll just comment that we anticipate making announcements by the end of October.
Oh, great. Thanks, Darcy.
I don't see any of the questions in the chat, but folks can feel free to unmute themselves and ask those questions out loud also.
Great. Well, not hearing any or seeing any volunteers on my end, I will go ahead and thank you all again for your time. Offer one more apology that we didn't get the technology working just so this evening, but appreciate all of your comments and information. And it looks like another excellent set of information from you all. So we'll do our work with that information and then be back with you all at the beginning of December and continue this process. So we thank you all very much for being with us, and please do refer the meeting recording and the information on the town's website to any stakeholders or participants you saw that couldn't be with us this evening. And we'll be happy to entertain any questions or comments people have via email or through, you could also share ideas or thoughts with Mary, and then she can get them to us as well. So with that, I guess since I said that, I'll share my email just briefly too. So my email at MAPC is jfiala, JFIALA @mapc.org. And so you can send along comments or questions about the study to me using that address. So thank you very much, everyone. We will end the meeting now. Appreciate all of your time again. Thank you.
Thank you.